my count is right, we've got 7 Easter lilies here. And I mean, Easter lilies are beautiful in of themselves, but I think more profoundly is they help symbolize 3 important lessons of the resurrection for us. Is one, it's always the promise of death to life. It's the promise that we must announce the good news to other people. And also, Easter lilies remind us, hey, that anybody who is baptized and has faith in Jesus is supposed to be beautiful and joyful. So Easter lilies, because they're of the bulb family, that they're not necessarily from the seed, that they're often the first plants to come out during the spring. And so they need light and water. And once they have those things, boy, they come out very, very nicely. And I think it's important because every time we celebrate Easter, it's always the first full moon after spring. It's the spring equinox. And so we always celebrate Easter during the springtime. And so a better way to symbolize the importance of spring and newness of life than with the Easter lilies. Now, Easter lilies, because they're the bulbs and they come out around springtime, I think it's a reminder of what Jesus said in John chapter 12. That before he announces his death, he says to the Greeks and the people in Jerusalem, that he says that a single grain that remains of its own remains a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. So we don't have 7 Easter lily bulbs, we have 7 Easter lilies, because the bulbs have died and have borne now the beauty of these lilies. So the Easter lilies remind us that the power of the resurrection takes things that were dead and transforms them into new life. Easter lilies also remind us that those who've been renewed in Jesus must announce good news. And we can see that in the image of the trumpet on the flowers of the Easter lilies. And trumpets are very, very significant in the whole of sacred scripture. That for the Israelites who've been wandering for 40 years in the desert, finally get close to the promised land. They go to Jericho, and for 7 days they've been waiting. And Joshua says, blow the trumpets, and the people yell, and the walls of Jericho fall down. So trumpets always herald, okay, it's something important we have to do, and so it begins the battle. Whenever a king entered his court among the Israelite kings, the trumpet was always announced. And even in the New Testament, trumpets are important. That Jesus says in Matthew chapter 20 that when he calls his elect, they will come to him by the sound of a trumpet. Twice in St. Paul's writings, he alludes to the rising of the dead will come when the trumpet blown by the archangels is blown. And then all the dead will rise to life. And so the trumpets are a reminder, hey, that there is something important that's going on. And so there's no better important news in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And so the Easter lilies remind us, hey, we have to announce the good news. We have a great message to proclaim, just like trumpets. And the Easter lilies remind us that by our encounter with the resurrection, we must be people of joy and beauty. Now, even though we have our Mass in the school gym, I'm sure it smelled pretty nice coming in today because of the fragrance of the Easter lilies. And also, if you notice that the what's called the stigma, so the antenna that comes out of the lily, is dripping with a fluid to help with preservation of the pollen and to help fertilization. It's almost like they're crying, they're weeping in joy because of their life. And they want to share that life by giving it to others. And I think so too that if we've encountered the Lord, our lives must be radiant, must be beautiful just as these Easter lilies are. So what the resurrection does for us, and looking at these Easter lilies, it reminds us, hey, we have to be radiant and joyful, we have to announce good news, and we always have hope, and we always triumph over death and with the promise of new life. And so the Easter lilies came forward through the power of light and water. And so you notice that we have our light here, the Easter candle. So for the next 50 days it will be lit because it is the symbol of Christ's descent among the dead darkness and has triumphed and has shown forth light. And also, we will very soon renew our own baptismal promises. And using the water that was blessed last night, we will encounter once again the graces of water. So Easter lilies are given life by water and light. So too, we encounter the power of the resurrection through light and through water. Now specifically last night, we had two people who were reborn in the Lord. They encountered the power of the resurrection through baptism. And so we rejoice with them and also with the thousands around the world who became Catholics by the power of baptism and their faith in the Lord. And so we rejoice in that. And again, we will also re-encounter this new life in our own baptism promises. I think we look at these Easter lilies and see the transformation that happens with water and light. And it's a reminder too that we are also transformed by water and light in our own baptism. It's a reminder that these Easter lilies also tell us that we have to go and share this faith with others. Now among the two who were baptized last night, the thousands who were baptized, it reminds me of a study that was done by the Pew Research Study Group in 2009. Is they analyzed the practice of religion in the United States. And they determined that the number one religious affiliation in the United States are Roman Catholics. Now, based just upon sheer numbers, the next largest religiously affiliated group are former Catholics. So Catholics who no longer practice their faith for whatever reason. In fact, in their study, for every one new convert or person who enters the church, 4 will have left. And I think it's a reminder, well, is the transfiguration of Jesus and also the resurrection really having an impact on people's lives? Or is this something that just kind of, it's nice to celebrate once a year and then it has no more bearing on my life? And I think it's important that when you look at these Easter lilies, that our own lives through baptism have to be transformative for ourselves and for others. Because when people encounter, like Mary Magdalene, her great friend has died and she's weeping. And so people encounter suffering in their lives, they say, how can a good God allow this to happen? But she trusted. It was like, she was like that bulb that when it encounters faith and grace, it transforms. And so she was a woman of hope. In fact, she's the first one to announce the good news of Jesus' resurrection from the dead. It wasn't the disciples, it was Mary Magdalene who did so. Or when people feel, oh, I'm satisfied with this life, I don't need Jesus in my life. It's too controlling. It's too mysterious. I want to be in control of everything. And so we have to also grapple with that when things don't go our way eventually in life. Or people just kind of get taken by the world, or even more so, the scandals of the church. Even our own lives have not been transformed by the resurrection fully. And so all these things kind of account for the 4 people who left, for every one who joins the church. So what can we do? I think as we look at these Easter lilies, it's a reminder for us to ask ourselves, am I truly beautiful and radiant and joyful in the Lord? Am I someone who announces the good news, that I've been transformed, but I'm too scared to share it with others? Or am I someone who has not put things to death in Jesus so they can bring new life? Is it some kind of a grudge? Is it an inability to forgive? Is it an anxiety? Is it an addiction? And so when we look at these Easter lilies, it reminds us, hey, that beautiful things happen when we truly encounter the resurrection of Jesus. That things that are dead are given new life, that is supposed to be radiant and joyful, and it is supposed to announce good news. And so today, let us rejoice that what happened over 2,000 years ago still has an effect in our own lives, the power of the resurrection, and we rejoice. And so too, let us today and the rest of our days announce this good news that Jesus has risen from the dead, that people's lives can be transformed, and it only makes sense in light of our own transformation. So let us once again be renewed in our baptismal promises that we will make, the power of the resurrection, and to be like these Easter lilies, to be radiant and joyful, to pronounce the good news that Jesus is risen from the dead, and that all people who are suffering, who feel that they're dead, can be given new life through our faith in Jesus.